Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. This is Linda Napier, standing in for T. Falcon Napier, along with our amazing panel of consultants and coaches. Today, what we'd like to do is kind of continue the discussion that we had on Tuesday. And what I'd like everybody to do is give just a little bit of an idea for all of us on the experience we bring to this panel. And because we all have different industries and different clients, and I think will be very valuable for everybody. So let's get started then. David, do you have a little bit of a synopsis of what we did on Tuesday?
On Tuesday, we talked a little bit about the Great Resignation and the difficulty that organizations are having returning to work. And that's what we thought we would make our session about today, and use the collective experience of the panel to come up and brainstorm and come up with some ideas that might help in this time of great turmoil.
Great, that's wonderful. Welcome, Pam. Pam just joined us. Oh, she's still muted. Okay. Where should we start?
Why don't we start with a little bit of a cycling through the panelists, and they can give a little bit of their background, maybe with an eye towards the Great Resignation.
Okay. Frank, since you joined first, why don't you kick it off?
Okay, I'll try to be concise here since it's a time expense. For about over 40 years, I've basically been an independent human resource trainer. Back in my 30s, I did the reorganization of AT&T, staff development for United Way, and I've graduated through a series of licenses through the major training companies, Performax and Personal Dynamics and SMI, and now Wiley Publishing, with who inherited the original DISC database of 60 million people. I work with the research and development team, developing new tools, most recently on emotional intelligence and productive conflict. That's that part of me. In present day, my main lanes are strategic planning and leadership. And because of recent Wiley research on the Great Resignation that I received several months ago, I've begun on the track of research on this to speak and present very soon formally on the Great Resignation.
Thank you very much, Frank. And well, David, why don't you go?
Well, my name is David Harrell, and I've been a coach, trainer, consultant for 37 years. I've focused on a number of things over the years: sales training, change management, effective interviewing and hiring, leadership and leadership development, team and team building, and all those kinds of things. I hold certifications from T. Falcon Napier, and I hold certifications from Human Synergistics and the Dennison Group with their cultural and leadership instruments. And my focus, I created a podcast over the last year called the Herald Hiring Method, which really outlines in details the hiring process in a way that should help people make better selection decisions and ensure fit before pulling the trigger. And I'm excited about our subject today.
Excellent. David, what industries or clients do you specifically think you've focused on?
You know, over the last 10 years, it's been mostly insurance.
Okay.
Insurance carriers and insurance agencies.
Okay, great. Great, thanks, David. Peter, would you like to go next?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, all. My name is Peter Metzner, and I'm delighted to be here. I think this is a really timely topic. I do executive coaching, team building. I work with teams that have communication issues. My niche in coaching is preventing executive derailment, which primarily revolves around behavior, which I've seen also play out in people leaving their bosses, not their jobs. So I've been doing this for about 22 plus years. I've worked for the Center for Creative Leadership and a number of certifications, along with the work that the brilliant work that Linda, you and T have been doing I also work with the Everything Disc, the 5 Behaviors by Patrick Lencioni, also run by Wiley. Myers-Briggs, another assessment called People Map. The main thing is to use tools to help people be more aware and more considered, and create the kind of trusting collaborative relationships that lead to retention, and then as well as results.
Excellent. And what industry or client base do you mostly work with?
Range. Recently, it's been more cities, city government.
Okay.
I've worked with federal agencies. I work a fair amount with medical schools as well,
Okay.
fellows and residents, to help them in the interpersonal areas as well. So I've been blessed with a pretty wide array. And when I look at executive derailment, it doesn't seem that that's limited to any one particular industry.
Okay, good. Wonderful. And Brian Sykes has joined us. Brian,
Yes.
tell us a little bit about what your specialty is and who you most work with.
Sure. Well, I'm trained as a physician, although I have not practiced. I'm not licensed in the United States as of yet. But I have been an entrepreneur for over 20 years, and I'm known as what's called an acquisition entrepreneur. So I actually buy businesses that are already making money and look at behavioral models to build performance so they can make even more money. So I use my background in neuroscience to help me with that. So what I'm looking to do and what I've been doing with entrepreneurs and with different digital healthcare companies and with different tech companies is we're looking at how do we build a culture of health as a new business imperative, because these conceptions of work alone are killing people literally. So that's what I'm focusing on in terms of the Great Resignation period.
Great, thanks, Brian. And Boris Bloom, I noticed you've joined us. Could you give us a little bit of an idea about yourself, please?
Sure, absolutely. So I guess best way to describe it is currently I'm a coach and consultant, but I've been an entrepreneur pretty much my whole life. I started out my career in financial services. And without boring anybody around my history there, I decided that I didn't want to be a product pusher, I wanted to be a problem solver. So I got out of that space a long time ago and became a crisis consultant, a turnaround expert for companies. And so I primarily work with a very particular ideal client. They are purpose-driven, growth-minded CEOs of usually privately held companies, small to medium-sized companies, at least 10 employees on the low end, but typically there are 50 to 250 employees in size. It really doesn't matter what industries that they're in, because I primarily work with the leader of the organization.
Okay.
So that's been my focus. From a financial services background, that's been very helpful in me working with these individuals, because I kind of understand some of the issues that they deal with day to day tactically in their business. But most of the work that I do is centered around some proprietary frameworks that I've developed. One of them is called the CPR Model, and it stands for cash flow, people, and risk, which are the three most prominent issues that companies face. And if you don't get all three right, you typically fail. And so as a crisis consultant, I focus on those areas.
Wonderful. Thank you, Boris. And Edie. Are you-
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I'm unmuted. I never know.
Good. Go ahead. Tell us about.
I forgot, Linda. What is the topic today that everybody's excited about?
Oh, we're talking about the Great Resignation that we were talking about on Tuesday.
Okay.
And just
That's
telling
it.
everybody a little bit about our backgrounds that we bring to the table to talk about this discussion.
Okay, got it. A little bit different. I started out as an occupational therapist and went back for my master's. So I've been a psychotherapist for almost 50 years and college professor, ABC talk show host, TEDx speaker, best-selling author. So it's just, I'm kind of into everything. I even got vacation rentals, but whatever. My son called, well, I don't want to tell you what my son calls me, but anyway, yeah, I've spoken on 5 continents, international keynote speaker, thousands of associations and Fortune 500 companies, basically change employee engagement, innovation, performance improvement, and dealing with difficult people. And the uniqueness is that I help people get unstuck. We don't just talk about change, we make it happen, because I'm very versed in the subconscious mind and applied neuroplasticity to a lot of the work in making change happen. Just got a call from the Coach Connection. He has about 100 coaches throughout the world. So I'm one of those. So I do the coaching as well. A lot of hypnosis and brain training. Still I've met with the Carolina Panthers. So I use it not only for the business world, but, sports and anxiety, depression, weight, gambling. I just saw somebody for the other day. But my real passion is my children's program, which is what I did the TEDx talk on, brain fitness for kids. I'm getting ready for another TED talk and really wanting to focus on rewiring children for health, happiness, and success. And parents have seen a change in 5 minutes. So it's where I feel I can make the biggest difference before I leave the earth. That's it.
That's great, Edie. You know what I'm thinking might be very interesting during the discussion, if you have any thoughts on how the Great Resignation is affecting the kids. So that might be something.
Because my next TED talk, I want to be on the COVID crisis and the messed up minds. We are going to have a bumper crop of kids that have grown up in a world that said, don't touch this, don't do that. And that's going to create a lot of PTSD in kids, and it already is, and anxiety. So there is an effect with all of, that's a good point. Thanks,
Okay.
Linda. Yep.
Good. Well, that's our panel, everybody. So David, I think we can, I can't think of the first question because there's so many.
Well, I read an article this morning in Cranes and I sent it to you. Were you able to read that article, Linda?
No, I just got back from an appointment before I started the call.
Okay, so there was an article this morning in Cranes called The Great Resignation. That article and articles like it, titled like it, have been popping up all over the country. It seems as though now, with a lot of senior leaders wanting people to come back to the office, they're getting a lot of pushback and requests from employees who want a more flexible work environment, who want to work from home or who want to work from home part of the time. I read an article where a senior executive was so disappointed with his work that he quit and went and started his own business. I think that's symbolic of a lot of people right now who are deciding what they want to do. So there's a tremendous amount of turbulence in the marketplace, a tremendous amount of turbulence in the employee bases of all organizations in the United States in terms of the pandemic winding down and work winding up. And the question of where are you going to work from or what am I going to do seems to be prevalent and in more people's minds than not.
Right.
So we have, in our client bases, a tremendous responsibility to be able to help them understand the dynamic and deal with the dynamic. And I think today we should spend some time talking about how to do that.
I think that's a great idea. Absolutely. That's, and I think we could probably talk all day about that, but absolutely. Absolutely. The solutions, we know the problems, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe what we should do is spend a little time. Maybe we should run the path, Linda, and talk about, where we're at. We just did that. What are we looking to achieve with our clients and their staffs right now? What are our objectives? What are we trying to help them accomplish? And I would tell you in my clients, it's making sure that people feel valued, that they see the future, that they see themselves in the future, that they're being supported and developed as they need to be able to succeed in their jobs, And that's and I did an article on LinkedIn, I don't know, it was a week or two ago, on the stay interview. In other words, how do you conduct a stay interview to find out what people are feeling, to find out what their challenges are, to find out what their needs and objectives are, and help them feel settled inside your organization and not looking to leave.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, David, I was just on another call and we were talking kind of about the same thing. And I brought this up and the guy thought it was right on. And, there's a shift in the dynamics I'm very concerned about. He was bringing up, many of you may have heard of this, that somebody's husband committed suicide. And the last call was a lot about culture. Okay. He committed suicide and she was awarded $800,000, almost $1 million, because it was a toxic culture at work. And so, there's this issue of whose responsibility is it? I mean, he had a choice. He could have left the toxic environment. But this is what I'm concerned about, is there's such a shift for managers, leaders, to create this great culture. What can we do to entice, to keep people so there isn't the turnover? And it's like a bad marriage. If you've ever been in a marriage where one does all the work and it gets very lopsided and it's not equal yoke, the more that dynamic continues, the more the passive person expects the active person to do it all. And I see that dynamic happening where, it's what can you do for me? And the expectations of the employees are getting where there's a denial of their own responsibility of, hey, wait, what do I bring to the table? And because employers are so desperate to just get, bodies in the seats to show up. And so I'm very concerned about that dynamic, to the point that now we sue but you had a choice to leave that culture. There's a point where there's a mentality that scares me. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And so, so all of your questions too in the interview, the story and all of that is good. But, it is what you bring to the table. And if they don't want to bring anything to the table, you need them more than they need you. And I guess I want to address that whole dynamic because it's scary to me.
Edith, I'd like to chime in on this. This is Boris. And here's one of the thoughts that's coming to my mind. I see a lot of companies struggling with this idea of attracting people, and it's partly in their own fault in terms of their process, because I think they've relied so much on the HR departments to do selection through automated systems. And they're selecting based on past performance. They're not asking these individuals, what do they really want to do with their career? Why would they want to be a part of this organization? Where do they fit? They're trying to manage people instead of leading them. And so they're either attracting the wrong people to the organization. I think the process is broken somewhere.
Absolutely. I would agree with Boris, because if you think about it, I was always told, I don't know who said the mantra, so to speak, but I was always told, you manage things, lead people. Managers graduating from these MBA programs learned how to manage people, but they don't manage themselves well. And I think about the Peter Drucker is one of my favorite management gurus. And he said back in 1999, when he wrote Management Challenges for the 21st Century, he said, when the history books are written, it's not going to be the technology, the automation that we're talking about. It's going to be this idea about humanity and how people had to learn to manage themselves. I remember for some research, clinical research I was looking at, back on the Bureau and Labor Statistics website back in 2003. So this is before the 2008 recession. They said a new person entering the marketplace by the time they turn 38 can expect 10 to 14 job changes. And it went on to say they can anticipate 3 to 5 career changes. That's back in 2003. So, you know, what Boris is talking about is this long-term relationship with doing the same things and expecting different results. When I was doing research in terms of designing some HR software, we discovered less than 4% of companies actually even know how to model performance. You can model every other aspect of business, financials and operations, but no one really models performance. So when they say we're looking for a good employee, you ask the question, what does that look like? No one knows. So this idea, there's a science behind fit, that term that Kathy used in the last call about psychological safety becomes important, because we know environment plays a key role on behavior. So when people are in toxic environments and they're choosing to stay, they may feel as if there's no other thing for them out there, because they're just going to make the assumption that all businesses function this way. They don't know to necessarily look outwardly. And then some stay for money, some stay for various reasons. So there's a dual effect where, you know, all the stakeholders from business to the employee candidate to the managers, this is an, you know, all in kind of proposition that everyone has to be in. It's not just one thing. It's not just one person. It's everyone must take responsibility for this. You know, idea of creating workplaces where people feel safe, secure, happy, and healthy.
There you go. There you go, Brian. Absolutely. Okay, the how, though. How?
That's where we start. I think it starts in part from the perspective of why we're all here.
Mhm.
This idea, how to create the environment where we can help people manage their tensions. One of the things that I see, and I talk about this idea of building a culture of health, I look at like these performance reviews, right? They're annual. One of the things we look at in tech companies is how do you utilize data straight away? We need data. They need feedback. People need that. I look at the research that I'm doing for performance with professional athletes, right? So now they have these tablets and they're in the game. They go on the sidelines and they can actually review what just happened. So they get some real-time feedback where they can now implement self-correction. You don't see this in business a lot. So there's no feedback until you get your performance review. There's no feedback or observation, you know, until someone comes and talks to you. So there's no self-correction. So you
But
don't build
is
those
that
kinds of
still
behaviors.
happening, Brian? Because that was a big focal point 20, 30 years ago, that we needed the immediate feedback that basketball players improve because they immediately know how to correct.
Yeah.
That seemed to be a hot topic way back when I started training. I'm surprised there's still a lot of companies that are just doing 1-year annual reviews. Really?
Yes.
That's sad. That's pretty sad. Wow.
Very sad.
I'd like to add something to what Brian is saying that I think is an issue. How do you assess performance if the performance metrics are based on just purely numbers and results? I think the issue comes down to how do you communicate the objectives of the organization and create strategic alignment. The best organizations I found out there use some sort of a methodology. The one that I've been attracted to over the years and I use called OKRs, which is objectives and key results, was something I learned about back in the day when Andy Grove was still running Intel. And he wrote a book called Only the Paranoid Survive. And when I was doing crisis consulting, it was a pivotal moment when I read that book and I realized what actually was happening there. It was all about having a clear communication path for the people engaged in the work so they understand what they're trying to do and where they fit into the puzzle of this organization. And I think that's been lost. And I think what's happening is people are showing up like robots to work, and they're being measured on the number of widgets that they're generating. And when they go to market and they say, well, this is a toxic culture, I don't want to be a part of this organization, I want to find another organization. They put their resume out there and they get filtered through these automated systems that say, well, you know, you're being compared to candidate B and candidate C, and there's hundreds of candidates and they all have, you know, metrics around what they did in the past.
Right.
And so I'm inadequate. Maybe I don't have as good of a resume, so I'm stuck in this job. I'm not going anywhere with my career. And I think that's the wrong message. I think the message should be about them being able to articulate their value to an organization, what they're passionate about doing, and then having the organization assess how that fits into their strategic alignment and how will this person be a valuable asset for them long term. And unless you can't lead that individual if you don't have an understanding where they want to go themselves.
Right.
I think that was the key word there, and that is lead. I think that, you know, part of the problem right now is that a lot of remote work and things like that are taking away those little touch points that most leaders used to have with their teams. They could walk around the office, they could stop in and chat, they could, you know, bond with them and create rapport and things like that. A lot harder to do over Zoom or Teams.
I think you're right on, David.
Yeah. Yep.
So what is the solution for that if people are really becoming used to working away from the office and loving working away from the office, actually moving their homes to more rural areas, you know, so what's the fix for that?
I think the key has to be communication. I think that, you know, I don't remember exactly who said it, but you have to have a good plan. And the plan has to be known, understood, appreciated, and be inspiring to those people in the room. If you don't start there, it's hard to get anywhere.
Exactly. And I see that Frank wants to join in. Frank, you can just go ahead anytime you want. You don't have to raise your hand.
Okay, I'm just a courteous, inhibited fellow. He says, that's my first lie. Well, I want to be brief. And I know, Peter, your experience with Wiley too, so you probably have access to the same article on the Great Resignation. But to answer the question, and I hate jumping to conclusions about solutions, but given the nature of this brain bank, I think it's worth skipping the middle, going to what the people want. And what the survey, it was a survey of 2,500 professionals, and what the results were, it gave 5 things. You might want to take notes. It's just 5 points. What the new worker wants, the hybrid worker wants, is personal time off and mental health days. Things are surreal in the lockdown. Things are happening in the background of families, family dynamics. I'm sure Edith could talk to that. And who knows, there may be something to deal with. And what they really want is a date for a deliverable and performance standards to keep their job and not be micromanaged with nonstop texts or how's the project going message. So PTO and mental health, personal time off and mental health days. Number 2 is greater flexibility. The third one is non-work time to connect. In my research, I found one company that said everyone's so stressed out that we're just going to shut everything down for a week and refresh. Non-work time also meant lunching with people. We're struggling. You're right about touch points, David. We're struggling for cerebral intimacy. People are more disclosing. So yeah, we're going to sit and stare at our Zoom camera and have lunch together, or in some cases, Saturday night cocktails so that lighten up and have playtime. Non-work time is the third one. The fourth one is long listening sessions with leaders. They really want to be got as a whole total person, not just as their job description, because they're at home. They're at home self. Recently, my team took on an assistant. We were very blown away, and forgive the anyway, sorry, I got distracted. The assistant took 2.5 hours to onboard because you're so talented. We wanted to make sure there was a family feeling and some, you know, good vulnerability on both sides. And then we moved this was the tech person. We moved them over to our tech person who spent another hour listening to their preferences and what are boundaries and what are their trigger points. And it was and now we're friends and this person turned into a good worker, but we did invest 3.5 hours in the onboard process. And the person's rocking and loyal and will be with us post-pandemic, which is another topic for another time, post-pandemic scenario. And then last of all, training opportunities. Number 5, they want upskilling, reskilling. If they've been away because they quit, employers want to know that that time was significant, that they've had other experiences or knowledge and are coming back refreshed with some new opportunities. So those 5 points are the solutions that came from the Wiley survey.
Excellent.
That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Frank. No, that's amazing. And probably there's I don't know, is there a million different ways to work with different companies and different people to have these things happen? I guess that's.
I think that goes back to the survey process. You know, you need to ask, right? What is marketing about? Asking what the customer wants. And the same, and now that the workers, at least for a while, have a sense of power, employers, a majority of them don't have to do this. Many are applying best practices in this time of change. But many, to answer your question directly, need to go and ask the people what they want and negotiate what is a workable compromise in a very difficult time, because the more pressure from workers means less breathing space for leadership and management. So all of you guys who are on this call who help with communications, my hat's off to you, because now more than ever, this survey has to happen. And as you guys know, there's a number of different ways to do that, from very casual and informal to very sophisticated testing instruments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would just add into that, Frank, that, you know, when you said negotiate, I think that survey needs to be so carefully constructed to both provide an opportunity for input, but also to guide and create some maybe bumpers of what is realistically going to be available. You know, because some people could come back and say, look, I just want to work remote, period. You know, send me my check. I'll log in every day and do my work. And for a lot of leaders, that's just not an option.
That's true. That's very true.
David, I have an interesting thing that you just brought up. I think that there's a difference between how you address senior leadership in an organization in relationship to everybody else. Okay. And because I don't have any input about everybody else, because that's not typically who I work with, I'll just comment on senior leadership, specifically the main leader in an organization. I think this all comes down to a very important question. How do you communicate and coordinate action? What is the framework for doing that in your organization? And if they don't have that and they can't articulate it clearly, I think that's where you start fixing the problem.
Yeah, communication is key.
Well, it's communication, but it's also coordination of action, because in my view, you're trying to build strategic alignment. You're trying to get the people at the base level of the organization to be engaged in what they're doing fully every single day when they show up, and be passionate about doing that. And the communication is one thing. I can communicate all day long my strategic objectives as a leader of an organization, but if I have no way to coordinate action, I don't have a framework to assess that and what the feedback's coming back from that, it's not going to work. That's why I really love this OKR model that we've used, because it helps us do that. We can set the strategic objectives out there, and we have key results that we're going to measure towards. And we set that up not only at the highest level of an organization, but then we embed that throughout the organization. So at every level, every leader in that organization has their own set of OKRs. They have their own set of objectives that they're trying to reach, but they have a team of people that they're leading towards that goal. And they know how they're going to measure that result, because they have key results that have been established, and it gets communicated throughout the organization. And if something's off, it becomes very, very evident quickly. But it requires that the top level of the organization embrace the whole framework. Otherwise, it doesn't work. You can't just do this, can't get a little pregnant. You either do this throughout the organization or you don't.
But
So
how do you
are they-
communicate?
Are they OKRs? Are they both qualitative and quantitative?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I look at the quantitative side as KPIs, not really the KRs.
Exactly.
Right? So
Yeah.
for me, that's about management, and I'm less
Right.
interested in that. I'm interested in
Right.
the qualitative aspects, and that's
Right.
where writing the correct KRs and teaching this framework to the leaders in the organization really makes all the difference.
Right.
What are we trying to accomplish? If I'm running a marketing team or I'm running a sales team, yeah, sure, it's easy to say, well, I need X number of widgets out the door, or I got X number of people coming in the door in terms of leads or sales. But what if I'm running a customer service department? What is the real objective that we're trying to do? Are we trying to build raving fans? What does that actually mean? And defining that. And once you have clear key results, then you measure towards those key results. How the work gets done is a secondary issue, I think.
Right.
It is, but I'll tell you, I've had some clients who've had EOS, entrepreneurial operating system advocates and professionals work with them, and they get all this in place, and yet they still have great difficulty working together.
So I'll explain to you why, in my opinion, because I know Gino very well. And I understand the EOS framework because I've bumped up against it many, many times. EOS is a great tool for smaller, less mature organizations. It is not a good tool as the organization grows. And where EOS fails is because it lives in what I call the tactical layer, the first layer of an organization. It's about getting things done. What it doesn't do well is it doesn't work on strategy. Strategy is a flexible, moving thing. It's not fixed. You can't manage it the same way. So any operating system, and it's not just EOS, is going to fail if the organization doesn't have a strategic layer in place and how they're going to manage those strategic objectives. And that's, I think, the difference here. If you have the strategy outlined correctly and a way to manage towards that strategy, and then you can communicate and coordinate action at the bottom levels of the organization, then it works. But in my framework, there's a third level above all of this. And that, I think, is the most important layer. And I call it the cultural layer. It's the level 3 organization. This is an organization that's figured it out. This is an organization that understands that culture is what drives that organization. It's the glue that keeps everything together. It is what drives strategic alignment at every level of the organization. So if you can get the cultural aspect right up front, and you're purposeful about doing that, you create that strategic alignment at every layer, and then you can coordinate everything around the strategy that you're trying to develop, which changes over time. And then EOS, it doesn't matter what's at the bottom layers of the organization as an operating system, whether it's EOS or something else, it'll work.
Yeah.
I think EOS or any operating system on its own doesn't do a job. I think most organizations, unfortunately, are built backwards. They're built from the bottom up. So they focus on the process, procedures, the tactical stuff, and they forget all about how to build the cultural aspect, which drives strategic initiatives. And
Exactly.
I think what people are passionate about showing up for work every day is those strategic initiatives. It is the cultural aspect. It's great to get a paycheck. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think that that's enough, especially in the context of what we're discussing. I think people need to feel really good about what they're doing. And they need to feel good, not that just the organization is doing good work and they're headed in the right direction. All of that's great, but they need to feel like they're a part of that and that there is a career path for them. There's a way for them to be a part of this solution.
Right.
But going back to what Linda said about the how, what do you do to get people to communicate that won't communicate? Because I see less of it. I mean, I'm thinking back when I worked at the hospital, we had a Christmas party every Friday after work. All the department heads got together. We had fish together. There was a social aspect. People are in silos again. And that's why they want to work at home. They don't want to see other people. I got vacation rentals here and they freak if their car has to park next to another car. And it's like the cars don't mind. They don't want to see another person. I have people that very much they'll want to rent. And when I say I have to have a conversation with everybody first, they disappear. There are so many people that won't talk. I have a grandson in his 20s, right out of college, making $250,000 a year because he's very techie oriented. But it's impossible to get him. So we talk so much about communication. And I find so many people, younger people, not wanting to communicate. They literally, if I have to have a talk with them they will text, but that's a limited communication. What do you do to overcome that?
This is Peter. I think, Edie, what you're saying too, I can't help but think with the pandemic and COVID, the social distancing, the mistrust, the stress, the anxiety, I think this is affecting a whole generation of workers. And what you're seeing with your grandson, I can't help but think that that's going to be fairly common. People normally introverted, combine that with social phobias now, germ phobias, and that this may be a phenomena. I don't know what kind of generational call that Gen COVID may be, but this might be a real hurdle to accomplish some of the things that we're looking at.
Yeah, and it already is actually. So like from a public health perspective, looking at the millennials, which is the larger workforce at this point in time, are suffering from a lot of anxiety. So some of those things that Boris just talked about, these qualitative things that often, is undervalued. That's how you train behaviors, right? That's how you create environments that bring out, or at least introvert can feel safe, secure, happy, and healthy. But again, organizations are just not doing that work in terms of the qualitative things. It used to be organizations would categorize hard skills and soft skills and this kind of verbiage, and that this still play out. But if you look at it, the so-called soft skills are a key element in terms of decision making, key element in terms of interpersonal skills, all these things that they're wanting in team building, communication, these kinds of things. And so we can't undervalue that and overvalue something else. There has to be an equitable balance that creates regenerative value. And that's where strategy comes in. And we're just seeing too many organizations with, I call it the Swiss cheese effects. There's just so many holes that the pandemic itself has now brought out those gaps. And they're going to find difficulty moving forward because you have a generation of people that's grown up in the sight and sound generation. They communicate differently. Their perspective of the world is different. And so you have to be able to meet them where they are. And I just don't see organizations willing to unchange, some things about themselves and how they function and look at some of this qualitative stuff. When we're studying performance in the lab, that's one of the things that comes out is the qualitative things that really drives performance, right? So from the outside looking in, what people tend to see, and we last studied Olympic swimmers. So what people tend to see from Olympic swimmer is, oh, they see Michael Phelps, they might hear he swims for X amount of hours. So if he's doing X amount of hours, then that might mean that I need to do one up more or something like that. But what they're not looking at is all the qualitative stuff. They're not looking at his habits. They're not looking at his sleep patterns. They're not seeing any of that stuff that helps him to perform. And that's where the qualitative aspects of organizational development becomes more important, especially during a pandemic.
That's true. That's true.
I'll also add, Brian, I think that one of the things that clearly this pandemic has brought is the idea that we can work remotely. And I personally have met people since this pandemic started that I met originally online. And I never thought I would meet them in person, but I got to tell you, I've been shocked at how much of a relationship we've been able to build in a remote fashion. So when you meet them online, it's almost like I knew this person intuitively. And I had that experience literally this morning with somebody I met with for breakfast. And I got to tell you, I think it's a little bit surreal because I never thought that I could build those kind of relationships. But what it came from was the fact that we spent significant amounts of time together online. We talked about things that mattered to both of us. And that's where the connections came from. So I don't think that the actual online experience, the technology, is as big of a hurdle as we might think, as long as we're having the right conversations and we're having enough of those conversations to meet the needs.
You know, that might be the big lesson here, Boris, is that this Zoom thing is so new and so overwhelming to everyone, but once they actually learn how to use it and that you can build relationships, I think that's an amazing aha.
Well, I would also add to that is prior to this COVID situation, everybody had, based on traffic and where you live, oh, okay, I can have 3-4 meetings a day, 4 meetings max. Okay. Well, in the COVID world, we're online. There's no travel. There's nothing going on. Oh, I can do 8 meetings a day. Well, 8's better than 4. So I'm just going to do 8. Right. And what people are doing is they're burning themselves out. They're not being focused on what's the quality of the interaction that they're having. Who are they actually spending that time with online? It's become way too casual. It's not purposeful. And I think that's where they're missing the boat about building connections.
Mm-hmm.
Good point. Good point.
Ditto, of course. Yes.
Hey team, this is Tim. I'll try and be brief because I've got some background noise, but there were 2 things I heard in the conversation that I connect to, and one had to do with organizational culture and the whole dialogue around the value of the soft skills. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And that's been one of the challenges in our work, is trying to get organizations to focus on that. When you think in terms of executive leadership, it is perhaps why the lack to embrace that is perhaps why we failed to see folks like HR executives ascend into CEO roles, is because of this perception of the devaluing of the people side of the business, particularly as it relates to culture. And so I really appreciate what I'm hearing on the call, and I think that that's the huge challenge. The other thing is, here in Georgia, there's a lot of eyes on this recent case from the EEOC with regard to an organization terminating someone who was requesting to be able to work from home. And so I think that that case, along with this kind of discussion, is really going to begin to push organizations and the leadership to figure out, well, how do we move forward in this post-pandemic situation? All right, thank you. I'm going to go mute.
Thank you, Tim.
Good to see you, Tim.
Thanks.
Frank, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'm keying off of the previous comments about, and all of you guys underscoring this, people feel devalued. They've had time to be more introspective. So you're right, it's a double whammy with those who were introspectives to begin with. And they're reassessing their values and work as a value, which is illustrated in the recent John Deere situation, a company that will profit over $6 billion this year, offered a 5 to 6% raise to the labor union, and the labor union said no. And seeing this pattern continue. So I just want to bring that up for discussion because I'm deeply concerned about the way organized labor, what that really means in terms of the big wheel, the long-term trend, and where are we going? 1932, Henry Ford had his strikers shot. Not that's not what organized labor is about today, but I don't think we need more attention through division, but there's a natural division happening with those who are moving towards the organized labor muscle building right now.
I think you're right on, Frank. There's a huge disservice that's playing out there because they're focusing on pay instead of what the real important thing is, which is how do we have happier workers at work?
Yes, Kellogg said, oh, they should be happy. We have a good benefit package, but as you guys know in the survey, a good benefit package is not the new motivator, particularly in these times.
Nope. People want meaning in their work. People want purpose in their work. That's what the research is showing. So, you hear politicians always advertise and they say, yeah, we got more jobs, more jobs, more jobs. Well, it's not just more jobs, it's jobs with meaning, it's jobs with purpose. Yes. One of the number one thing that people really want is to be connected to something. That's why this idea of work-life balance has always been like a myth to me. It just didn't make sense because you can't split that, right? People want work-life integration is what they're really after, is what the research is showing. They want to be connected with something that has contribution, and they feel like they're part of a community. There's growth there. Those are the kinds of things that the research is showing. That's not work-life balance. That's work-life integration. There's a difference.
But Brian, how do you tell an assembly worker at GM that they have meaning and purpose? Now, I understand they're building a bigger car and it's getting people from point A to B, but I think work-life balance for people who are living life on purpose, that's fine. But how do you find purpose when you're just putting a nut and a screw on all day long? Just what do you do? How do you make that?
Exactly. You're talking to people who love what they do. I met a motorcycle mechanic that's what he still does. In fact, he's written really great books, but he went back to school to get his PhD. But he talked about shop craft, the class shop craft. So in other words, having a craft, doing something that you love, building a passion out of that, and how that leads to other areas and other aspects of life in terms of building out this passion. So it's not just about, the white collar jobs that create meaning. You create meaning in anything because, again, if you go to the studies from Meaning Institute, I forget the professor's name, but meaning isn't in the job. Meaning is created by the one doing the work. It's the same thing when people say, oh, I do not get enough satisfaction out of the work I'm doing. Well, if you're only looking for satisfaction in the work you're doing, and you don't include the one who's doing the work, then again, you're going to be out of sorts because everything is external. There's nothing internal. So if we're walking
and I understand that. Yeah, but if you look at Drive and Pink's, I think Pink made some pretty good statements. The difference is, what level people are at. If it's a menial job, and I hate to use that term, and it's rote and it's repetitious, and it's like being on a circular track that goes nowhere. It is just difficult. Now, I understand you can have the sense of community and you can have free lunches, but for those people, work-life balance is a little different. I grew up in a blue collar, Wisconsin, Green Bay, and those people worked so they could go on the weekends to Crivets and get drunk and go to their camper. And so I think it's different if you have somebody that has a job that is rote and repetitious, not at all creative, not at all challenging, than a job that is. I think we have to decipher that. There's a big difference, I think. It's hard
I can see where it'd be different, but again, we're talking about what you can do in the environment so that even if that is the case, I talk to postal workers who
Right,
say, yeah, my
right.
job is, is monotonous, is this and that. But they have different things that their managers, and not all managers are created equal, are doing to
Right.
mitigate that, to help. So in other words, again, we talked about stakeholders and the roles that everyone plays in this. So a forward-thinking manager, a forward-thinking leader will understand that and create the environment so that even when people are doing work that's monotonous, they can survive, they can thrive, they can do all those things. So again, it's all these stakeholders that are involved in this have to
No.
participate, because the Industrial
And I
Revolution was
agree
built
with
on that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And my work play is not separate because I love what I'm doing. But for some people, we have to acknowledge that, getting to buy the fishing pole to go fishing on the weekend and get the canoe is the separation can be more important. I think we just have to acknowledge there is a difference. There is.
Well, I love this conversation. I'd love to chime in on this. I think that the key thing that Brian mentioned is leadership. This is a skill of leadership. And even though you have somebody at the lower rungs of an organization that's doing menial work, if we want to call it that, they have a leader. They have somebody that hopefully is leading them, not managing them. And if that person simply asks them, what drives you? Why do you wake up in the morning and show up here and put screws in that hole? I mean, you're doing it for a reason. It's not just the paycheck. And they'll tell you. And if it's fishing on the weekend, well, it's up to that manager to think about what's the right reward system. How do I engage this person in this organization to be even more productive? And there are people like Brian described that absolutely love putting screws in a hole.
Well,
Man,
and
they're
they
really
don't
good
want
at
to
it.
be, and they don't want to be challenged a lot. But I'm just saying, there's an intrinsic reward system and an extrinsic reward system. And for people like that, the extrinsic reward system tends to be more important, I think.
And that's okay. I think that's good to have. And that's the leadership component. I think the leader can create an environment for his team, what matters most for them.
Exactly. I just wanted to say that for some, there is a separation of work and play. That's the point I was making, more so than, if you love writing books, you can do it 24/7 and you're living life on purpose and it's exciting. And for some people, the separation of work and play and extrinsic reward, it tips in another direction. That's all I'm saying.
Well, let's look at the obvious. We have this time dedicated to T. Falcon Napier, who's on a 3-week vacation.
And he hasn't taken a vacation in probably 6 years. So that's.
But Diana, who he's with, is taking calls and doing therapy while she's on the trip, which I think is unfortunate.
Exactly. And T is working.
Yeah.
I was just kidding, Linda.
God,
but he's enjoying it. But he's enjoying it just.
I know T never stops.
He doesn't.
It's okay.
Well, you guys, it's on the hour right now.
Great conversation.
Would you like to continue this discussion on Tuesday, and T will be back? Or would you like to start a different series?
Well, let's leave it up to T.
Okay. We can do that. Excellent, everybody. Well, thank you so much. This has been an amazing discussion. And we'll talk to you on Tuesday.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care. All right. Thanks a lot, buddy.